What's up guys, welcome back to Destiny Updates. The latest issue of Edge magazine had quite a long article on Destiny with some pretty interesting information that's definitely worth going over, so let's look through it. To start off, they mention aiming down the sights or iron sights in Destiny. This was already shown in the gameplay demo at E3, but I don't think I ever pointed it out, so I thought I should mention it. Next, they have a little column on the alien design in Destiny saying, for enemy AI to be considered successful at Bungie, they must be fun to fight again and again in isolation. Designers will fight a single, endlessly respawning enemy inside a test environment until behaviors are perfected. Tactics applicable to Halo will be useful in Destiny, from stealth and preparation to simply sitting out the fight and allowing two alien factions to fight each other. Many of Destiny's factions are at odds with each other, united only by their distaste for humanity's presence on the worlds they claim. So that seems to confirm something I've speculated on, which is that the alien races are definitely not all friends and will sometimes battle each other. Moving on, they spoke with Joe Staten, who talked about how Halo was a strong foundation and a chance for Bungie to learn how players work. Although I'd say it was a lot more than that for us fans, Halo is part of my life, really. Joe Staten said he thinks they did two things well with the Halo games. One, we told a story that you could play by yourself or with a small group of friends. And two, we made a great, hardcore competitive game. Between those things, we tried to do other things, but the options are very slim, and I think that's true for most shooters. Then he said that there's a lot of opportunity between those two things, and they want to very carefully bring them together and open up the choices. On to the next thing, this one's pretty interesting. They talk about Destiny potentially giving you certain scenarios and clues, but letting you fill in the blanks yourself. Chris Barrett said, we're always trying to imbue these pieces with all kinds of interesting questions, and a lot of them we won't answer. How did those cars get there? Why are they there? Where were they going? You have to think like you're a viewer with a painting. They're asking their own questions, telling their own story. That's more powerful than us being explicit about what something is and why. Those kinds of moments raise questions about the world that we can potentially pay off 5 years from now when you're revisiting that space. Planting those seeds, that's really exciting for us, I think. Now that's quite interesting and also links into the theme of underlying mystery that they've been talking about. They compare Destiny to a type of painting where you don't fill in every minute detail, instead you leave some edges a bit blurred and let people fill it in themselves with their imaginations. It sounds like there will be a lot of things that they may not fully explain, leaving us to formulate our own idea of what it is. Then some years later we may have to return to that location and new information will become clear. I don't know about you, but I think that sounds pretty damn cool. I like the idea of certain things not being fully spelled out, and as years pass we will personally discover new knowledge to make things clear. I think that will make the game really immersive and make us keep coming back for years. That also supports what we previously thought about the future Destiny games, that being the idea that new Destiny games won't be completely different, instead being more like MMO expansions where a lot of new content is added to the world and things are heavily overhauled, but our character, our legend, and everything we've achieved stays with us. Essentially, the game just keeps growing and evolving rather than getting completely replaced. At least that's what I think. Continuing on, they talk about public events, saying that public events are cyclical and will happen regularly. If you visit a spot on the Cosmodrome, you'll get the idea that an event is going to happen after a set amount of time. So I think public events will happen over and over again in the same area at certain times. Then they said, we really want to use public events to slam together people who wouldn't ordinarily run into each other. Different classes, levels, interests, smaller groups, fire teams. These public events are meant to collide lots of different players around a core, short nugget of fun. I like the idea of pairing really different players together, but I'm a little unsure about mixing levels. It seems like high-level players will simply wipe everything out for you, but I'm sure they'll have a system to balance it. Next, they talk about map size, saying, sometimes a map is half a kilometer across, sometimes it's up to our engine maximum right now, 2 square kilometers. And that's really big, especially for the kind of intricate combat and exploration we want to do. You'll walk around this world, sometimes directed, sometimes open, and discover things too strong for you and doors you can't open. Going on to say that they'll put awesome rewards behind obstacles, things you'll have to do before returning to get through and claim the reward. I think that sounds really cool. Basically we'll be adventuring through the world and we'll see something awesome, but we won't be able to get it for some reason. Still, we get a glimpse, a little tease, so that will drive us to accomplish whatever it is we need to do so we can come back for that awesome thing. Next, they talk about running into other players and say some pretty interesting things. I wouldn't say every space is like a hub with spokes off of it. We think of them as having circulation patterns. There are many reasons why you might go there, whether it's a particular story mission, to gather resources, whatever. Now let's just pause the quote there real quick. I thought it was interesting that he said gathering resources. It's possible he just meant money or other miscellaneous things, but I have to wonder if Destiny will have other forms of resources as well. Perhaps really basic raw materials that you can sell or use for crafting? Just a thought. Now back to the quote, he says, "Players will constantly cross paths. Making sure we don't split our population into different shards or servers means we're pretty sure that there's always going to be a population no matter where you go. If you look at concurrency counts, which are in the hundreds of thousands to millions for games of the size and scale that we think Destiny is going to be, there's always going to be players if you go somewhere. If you're at a destination for an hour or so, I'd imagine you'd run into 50 or 100 players." Now that really makes Destiny sound like a full-on MMO, but as Edge magazine points out, they only showed 7 players on screen at once at E3, and they're not talking about final numbers yet. There's also a quote here from Chris Butcher which says, "What's important to realize is that because it's a first-person shooter, even if we could get 100 players in a single area, we probably wouldn't, because it wouldn't be fun." Then he talks about fire teams being 3 players and says, "I imagine we could do more than that, but doing more tends to lead to a social dynamic where you just turn into a mob, running through shooting everything in your path, sprinting to the end of whatever you're doing. The term we use for that is Clown Town." I guess I can see where they're coming from there. When you play with larger groups, you tend to forget about the story aspect a bit more. They'll have other modes for more players, I'm sure, but when in private story areas, I don't really mind the 3-player count. The other thing in that quote is that Destiny will not have shards or separate servers like many MMOs have, so I think that's great. Even more than that though, it makes me wonder about players on different platforms joining together. You know, PlayStation and Xbox playing together, or even Xbox 360 to Xbox One and PS3 to PS4. It's been hinted at in the past, and Bungie has said that a lot can be controlled on their own servers, plus them saying that there's no shards or separate servers makes me think it's more likely. But we have no idea if it's really possible or not. I certainly hope it is though. On to the next thing, they talk about how in Destiny the universe has been created in such a way where they can do almost anything they want. They don't have to logically explain how something exists, they can just make it work. And I believe that comes from Destiny's fantasy aspect. I think that's really cool, as it means a lot more crazy fun stuff that wouldn't normally be possible. Even things like jungles on Venus, that's not logically possible, but in Destiny it's there, and I think it's awesome. Also, they were asked about putting real-life landmarks in Destiny, and they said it's something that they're definitely playing with, so that's pretty cool. Next, they mentioned Destiny's full day-night cycle, which we already knew about, but then they also said that it's accelerated so you won't have to wait 4 months to experience morning on Venus. Joe Staten went on to say that they're doing things that will be familiar to any open-world games, including Far Cry, then saying that they'd be idiots if they didn't look at the way things are done in Borderlands. In Borderlands, you can pair up with friends to clear out areas, but you won't collide with strangers doing the same thing. In Destiny, you can see other players on the horizon, hear gunfire over a hill, and see space magic flying behind some trees. Basically, there are other people out there, the world is alive. Now, I do think Destiny will have a procedurally generated weapon system a lot like Borderlands. It was almost confirmed in an old article, and I definitely think that's what they're going for. Moving on, they talk a little bit about exploring the world, saying that visiting destinations in Destiny is mission-based. You can't just explore freely. But Joe Staten said that's something that they're actively discussing, it isn't final yet. And he made it sound like even if it's not completely free roam, it will still provide opportunities for you to visit locations again and again. Also, once an opportunity for you to venture to an area comes up, you could stay in that location, exploring, hitting up public events, leveling up, etc. for as long as you like. Now personally, I do enjoy games being completely free roam, but at the same time, if they provide a lot of ways for us to revisit places such as side quests, challenges, whatever, then I don't mind. It might even be pretty cool. Next up, Joe Staten says that the first thing you experience is the story, and once you complete a section, they'll say, here's the next story chapter, but before you go do that, can you choose one of these additional objectives? There'll be some sort of extra quest or mission that will attempt to draw you into other types of play and activities. It sounds like once you complete the story, you'll see all the side objectives you've done and will get lots of awesome rewards. Then more missions will also open up to you, at least that's what it seems like to me. Then they talk about how Destiny is built to be played forever. It has no ending set yet, or even a detailed plan for what happens next. Joe said that what they learned from Halo is that if you don't have a plan for the future, you're scrambling to catch up with your own success. This time we're planning for success, and that's enabled us to imagine a future where many things are possible. It also allows the plot a long arc, which is great. In Halo we certainly didn't have that. We planned for an 8-hour experience, 2 years later figured out another 8-hour experience. This time we're thinking about how you grow and evolve this world over many years, many hours. It's a whole different mindset. So that's pretty interesting. They plan for the future, keeping things really open for expansion, but don't have a detailed plan either. He goes on to say that he thinks this type of game is the next step, that there will always be a place for beautifully crafted solo narratives, he references The Last of Us in the interview, but once you finish it, you want more, and have to wait 3 years. He also says that he thinks once players experience Destiny, that they'll look back at standard solo campaigns and see them as rather empty, lonely environments. Now, I don't know about that. Destiny will be amazing, I'm sure, but as he said before, beautifully crafted single-player games will always have a place in my opinion, as will solo RPGs such as Elder Scrolls, or The Witcher, and many other non-multiplayer games. But it does feel that connected, shared worlds are the next evolution in gaming. It seems like all the latest games are implementing them in some form or another, and it does seem pretty cool. The final thing in the article is a column about Destiny on the different console generations. They said Destiny was developed with the 360 and PS3 as the benchmark, and there is little in the PS4 and Xbox One builds that players won't find in the current generation. Both generations have the same maps and matchmaking systems. 360 and PS3 have real-time lighting and physics-based cloth, just like the next-gen versions, and two players can walk to opposite ends of the map and stay connected on all platforms. Now that makes me wonder if he means players on different platforms. I'm not really sure, let me read it off again. He says, two players can walk to opposite ends of the map and stay connected on all platforms. Does that mean two players from any console at all, or two players from the same console? Chances are he just means two players on the same platform, but it did get me excited. I'm really hoping for that functionality in Destiny. What do you guys think though? Do you think he meant two players on the same platform, or two players on completely different platforms? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, he goes on to say that the next gen upgrades are cosmetic, such as full 1080p HD with higher res textures, more geometry, etc. So basically the gameplay experience will be just as good on the current gen as next gen. It sounds like the only difference will be graphical fidelity, so if you're not planning to upgrade right away, that's definitely a good thing for you. Now something else that caught my eye there, out of all the performance and graphical upgrades that they mentioned, 1080p HD, higher res textures, etc., they didn't mention higher frame rates. I would imagine Destiny on the next gen should be able to run at 60 frames per second, but we haven't heard anything about that yet. It's possible he just didn't think of it on this list of stuff, or maybe they're not ready to talk about that yet, but I'm definitely wondering whether Destiny will run at 60 FPS on the next gen. He went on to talk about the engine and their tools, mainly how easy it is for them to create interactive worlds now due to their tool set, but that's not really new information. It was pretty much all discussed back at GDC. I have older videos about that if you're interested. Anyways, that's everything I found really interesting in the latest issue of Edge magazine. The rest of the article was mainly stuff that was already talked about in the past or didn't seem too important. I hope you guys enjoyed the video though. I put a lot of work into this one, so if you did enjoy, leaving a like would be awesome. It really helps out a lot and is very much appreciated. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next update.